Hi everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Over the last few weeks in our weekly lessons, we've been discussing different topics. In our first week, we started talking about how we have free entry into museums and how that motivates us. It pushes us to act. Something's free, oh my goodness, I must have it because it's free. And then this week we've been talking a little bit about suffragettes and also women's rights and what motivated those women, why there was a need there for those women to be doing what they did and for them to achieve the things that they managed to achieve. It obviously wasn't easy for them, but yet they were determined and they were motivated. In both of these examples, there's one thing that we can talk about and one thing that brings them together, and that is energy. These women had a lot of energy to be traveling around the country promoting this idea that women should have a right to vote. As well as that, it seems that people who travel to museums and who like to enjoy those kind of things are very moved and have energy because the thing is free. So today, I'd like us just to focus on this word energy for a moment, to talk about what it is and how we create it. As language learners, one big issue for us is when energy doesn't flow. Now, there might be many reasons why it doesn't flow. It might be because we're not honoring our pathway in life. It might be that we're doing things that, well, maybe aren't really our things. It could be that we're stuck in a place or situation where we feel hopeless and our energy is somehow dampened. The question about what actually is this energy and how it's defined is probably a question for theologians or for people who are involved in that kind of thing. Perhaps a more useful question is, how do we see it and how do we work with it, particularly in language learning? We hear people saying things like, oh, I have no energy. I wish I had the energy to do that. And we also hear people talking about their level of physical energy. I do know that in these days where we really do pay a lot of attention to things like medicine, the medical world tends to put us and bits of us into compartments. There's the brain, which, for example, has its own problems for which you might need medication. And then there's your legs, which for whatever reason may have an issue, and you're given tablets to fix it. Then there's the rate at which blood pumps around you, which again gives this idea that if it's not working properly, then of course you need more pills to fix it. It doesn't seem to be very holistic. There's no mention of energy in the body, whereas if you look at Chinese medicine, they're more concerned about the flow. And the idea is if energy gets stuck somewhere, then it can stop you moving, and it can also become quite dangerous, in the same way as if a river can't go forward, the water builds up until eventually it causes damage in other ways. I don't know too much about energy, but I do know that we can see evidence of it, and I also know that we in some way are responsible for letting it flow. Now, gurus, mystical, spiritual people always tell us that if we hold resentment against other people, it makes us tense and it makes our bodies a little bit harder. And they also tell us that love is supposedly the key to all of the things that we do in life. Now, it is true that if we look back to these suffragettes, these women who were pushing for the right to vote, they somehow were channeling an energy. It wasn't just that they were passionate about the movement, that's maybe the evidence that they were channeling the energy. In much the same way as a bus is being driven by a driver, he puts his foot on the accelerator to make the thing move. And in some ways, he also is channeling energy. When we create the right atmosphere, getting energy moving is a good thing. But we also can create the wrong type of atmosphere where energy seems blocked. And that's a really big thing for people who are learning to study, or people who don't have a good, strong route for beginning studying. Because we've taken away this idea of energy being our source, we tend to make choices excluding it. We make choices from the front part of our brain rather than looking deep inside at what our body is asking us to do. And not only that, we're encouraged now to have a victim mentality. And that's when people around us, we blame them. Maybe our parents had problems, so we say, oh, you know, I'm the child of a parent with problems. And then we go on to maybe blame other people or circumstances for the period or the circumstances we find ourselves in. I read something yesterday, it was a meme, I think, on social media, which said that your greatest wound is what carries you forward. Maybe that's true in some ways, but yet in another way, it gives us this idea that from the very beginning, somehow we are stuck and we're supposed to be suffering and on a journey out of that. It is one philosophy. I mention this because there's a complexity in psychology which talks about shadows and shadow entities. And the idea is this, that there are shadows of previous experiences in our lives which move around in our subconscious and the deeper parts of our mind, and they scream at us to do things. Now, of course, because it's a mental process and these shadows don't in reality exist, what happens is we make choices and decisions to please them. For example, imagine that you believe one of your parents didn't pay enough attention to you. So what happens is when you start dating someone who is the same as that parent who ignored you. And it's all being controlled by this shadow figure in the background who's saying, okay, now you must listen to me because you didn't listen to me before, so I recreated the process. You must listen to me. And therefore, if the person doesn't text you within half an hour, 2 hours or 3 hours, you remove them and you block them and you're angry because it wasn't you that was dealing with this situation. It was a very enraged part of you, this shadow that works behind the scenes. Now, if it's true that we are dealing with ideas from the past which kind of haunt us and step in to take control of different bits of our life, if that's actually true, then it would explain a few things about behaviors around us. And it also would explain why something like learning English can become so mundane and so boring because people are looking for excitement. It also could be that people are saying, well, I don't have time to deal with something like language learning when my father didn't listen to me when I was young. I feel too angry to be involved in something like languages. Now, I'm mentioning all of this because the question is still there. All of this energy which is producing thoughts, producing victims, producing. And yet here we are, on the other hand, saying, well, yeah, that's true, but I don't have energy, I don't have motivation to learn. But yet there's so much energy around us going into negativity, going into the work that we have to do every day, going into public transport, that man or woman who's driving the bus. So it seems to me that there's loads of energy around, but the question is, how do we tap into it and how do we use it? There's one proverb which we use a lot in English. It's just a saying. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago in one of my podcasts. And it says, just go with the flow. But if that flow is negative, to go with the flow just means to go with the crowd or with the thinking that's on the table at the moment. But if that thing is negative, we shouldn't just go with it, should we? Because we're going to end up in that same place as other unsuccessful people. So if you've surrounded yourself with people who, for example, simply can't or don't take responsibilities, who are always complaining, then you'll just get washed away with those thoughts. As I always say, your joy level is a very good indicator as to whether you're doing the right thing. During English lessons and at times when we try to learn, all of us are faced with some kind of darkness. Am I doing the right thing? Am I around the right people? Is this the right thing for me? After all, I'm investing money in it. So is this definitely right? And there's all these kinds of questions going around. We don't need to be experts. We just need to be aware of our joy level and how much peace we have. Looking back at these suffragettes and also our previous lesson about free entry to museums, which generates a kind of energy itself, our affirmation for today is, I have peace enough to learn daily. So if you have peace and peace enough to learn daily, then that simply means that just for today, you have enough to be going on with, and you have enough to be thinking about. So those are just a few little thoughts for today about energy and how you can use energy. As we move forward, we'll be talking more about affirmations, but I'd like to come back to this sometime about energy, particularly where your energy comes from. Is it coming from a shadowy place? Someone's driving you in the back of your mind to be successful. I say someone, but it's really something that in reality doesn't exist, but it has a way of sabotaging your plans. Or maybe there's something else happening. Maybe you're someone who's very, very mentally healthy and you're able to push yourself into the forefront of learning. Or maybe you have all kinds of doubts looking over your shoulder saying, can I really do this? Whatever's happening, energy is stirring. But the question is, what will you do with it today? That's it from me. Let's talk soon. See you. Bye.